Okay. Now we are on. Yay! I think you're too tall. I think I'm not framed right. Better. The moon is alone, and so am I. My sleeves are wet with tears. Rosamund Hodge. Bright smoke, cold fire. Or, alternately, someone else should be avenging her. Someone who wasn't so stupid. Rosamund Hodge. Bright smoke, cold fire. La 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 la. Bright Smoke, Cold Fire is a young adult novel by none other than Rosamund Hodge, who also wrote Cruel Beauty and Crimson Bound, both of which I have read and enjoyed. They are also both known, by me, for their beautiful circular cover designs. As you may note, Bright Smoke, Cold Fire also has a beautiful circular cover design. This one is a retelling of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, or as my Norton anthropology of Shakespeare calls it, the most excellent and lamentable tragedy of Romeo and Juliet, set in a fantasy world called Viara. And beyond that, the book is taking quite a few liberties with the original story. I guess now is as good a time as any to warn you. If you are expecting the plot to unfold exactly the way it did in the original and will be extremely displeased if it does not, this may not be the book for you. As a first and foremost major departure, this fantasy world contains a variety of intricate magic systems, religions, and world-building related to such. It gives a stronger and more nuanced voice to its female characters than the original, and the viewpoints and perspectives, the eyes that you as the reader look through, are not quite the usual. As I said before, the book is set in a world called Viara, the last city alive in a world overrun by the dead. Revenants, they're called, but they're all locked outside the magical wall maintained by an order of blood magic nuns. This is where we meet Rosaline. I mean, Runajo, as she's called in this one. She's the girl that Romeo believes himself to be in love with before he meets Juliet. She has joined the blood magic nuns because the magic wall is failing and she believes she's the only one intelligent enough, brave enough, and disposable enough to save them all. In the next chapter, we look through the eyes of Paris. In the original, the man Juliet was supposed to marry. In this version, the man who is supposed to become her guardian now that Tybalt is dead. In this world, we discover Juliet is not a name, it's a title. And Paris is about to become the Juliet's guardian, capital G, so you know it's very serious. The guardian has a magical mental connection with the Juliet, and at the opening of the novel, the ceremony to complete it will be performed soon. Only before it can, Juliet disappears. Apparently intent on performing the guardian ceremony with, gasp, someone else. I'll give you 3 guesses. I'll give you 3 guesses who. It's Romeo. The answer is Romeo. Okay, we all knew that. We were all fully aware of that, hopefully. According to the back of the book, so it's not a spoiler, I promise, this goes awry, and our 4 heroes find themselves believing the others to be dead and magically linked to the last person in the world that they want to be with. Beyond all that, something sinister is brewing behind closed doors. Political scheming is making everything significantly more complicated, and if that wasn't enough drama, there's always the horde of literal zombies. Well, they're called revenants, but, you know, they're zombies. To be quite honest, it took me a long time to pick this book up. I was very interested in the premise when I bought it, but when I read the first chapter and I realized that the main building block of the world was zombies, I was hesitant. I will not lie to you. Zombies are my least favorite monster. Zombies are my least favorite Halloween monster. They are usually the only kinds of horror movies, zombie movies, are usually the only kinds of horror movies that can give me nightmares. And I usually find their use as characters in shows such as iZombie or other shows that try to humanize the monster kind of unappealing. In the book, the zombies ended up not really being a problem for me on either the fear factor or the nose wrinkle characterization factor. And in fact, the rest of the world being overrun by zombies provides a number of interesting and nuanced additions to the world building later on in the story. Which brings me to the first thing that I liked about this book, the world building. And by the world, I mean the city, because we don't get to see the rest of the world. The whole zombie thing I spent a paragraph talking about. There are a number of interweaving belief systems and factions within the city. Different peoples and families that have very different, sometimes diametrically opposed views on the world, the afterlife, magic, how it even works, and what can be done about it all. The book does a wonderful job of giving you the facts from the perspective of the character whose eyes you're looking out of, and then introducing through conversation and organic discovery that these beliefs are not shared by everyone. And in fact, much like our world, an infinite number of people will believe an infinite number of things about the cosmology of the universe. Also, there is something called the Sunken Library, and let's just say, while it doesn't top the list of my favorite fantasy libraries, it does rank on that list somewhere. No spoilers, but like, amazing. My next compliment to the author is on the wonderful construction and communication of character. Our characters are distinct and diverse, and beyond that, they remain true to the spirit of the original story. Oh, caveat. When I say diverse, I don't necessarily mean diverse in the way that we use the concept of diversity in terms of POC representation or LGBT representation or disability representation. So please don't take that as a buzzword. I mean it in the sense that the characters are completely distinct. Their personalities are distinct from each other. They have different voices, and those voices are very obvious. Paris is basically a Dungeons & Dragons paladin who has ended up working for a neutral evil boss for reasons. Romeo is just as dramatic and naive and obsessed with poetry as one could possibly ask for. On the other hand, Juliet and Renajo, Rosaline, I don't know how you say it, sorry, end up being interesting departures from the literature. Juliet loves Romeo, and Renajo does not. And these still fall within the spirit of the original character. But if you remember, Rosaline in the original is mentioned, but she isn't really a character. She doesn't come into her own at all. She's, at the beginning, Romeo laments that he has been maligned by this woman who has joined a nunnery instead of loving him. And that's it. That's all she gets. She doesn't get to have feelings or goals of her own. This Rosaline, aka Renajo, does get those things. As I said at the beginning of this video, here, Juliet is more than just a woman to be bought and sold by marriage. She has duties and responsibilities to her family that include more than just putting a ring on her finger. All this is to say, I love them all, and I love their depth and their conviction, and the fact that all of them are portrayed as both righteous and flawed. They all have valid goals and opinions and feelings and convictions, and they are all also flawed and come into conflict because of those flaws. And I really enjoyed that. I think it's hard to find something that does both of those things very well, that makes all of its main protagonists want very different things that can be seen as diametrically opposed without necessarily positing, well, this one is the morally correct position in this particular way. I think it's fascinating. I honestly can't think of anything that I really disliked about this book. Although, I can imagine that there are things that one could dislike about this book. One might criticize the level of departure from the original material, because like I said, there are zombies, characters have different names, the plot is wildly, wildly different, because it centers around the magic system, which obviously doesn't exist in the original. Or you could dislike the fact that there is a second book, which is, again, bending the timeline of the original story. It's adding on to the end, so it is very much departing from Romeo and Juliet. One might also criticize the characters for an almost soap operatic level of drama. These didn't bother me in my consumption of this story. But, I mean, it's entirely possible other people's reading tastes may differ from mine, obviously. So take those things into account, I guess, as you jump in to this. To sum up, I liked this book. I'm hoping that I will also like the next one when I have a chance to get to it, and I'm hoping that that happens pretty soon. Till next time, happy reading!